Picture this. It's the dead of night at one of the busiest airports in the world. A black van pulls up to a cargo gate, bolt cutters flash, and 6 masked men burst in. In under an hour, they vanish with nearly $6 million, the biggest cash haul in American history at the time. No shots fired, no alarms. It was the perfect heist. But what followed wasn't perfection. It was a nightmare of betrayal, murder, and paranoia that left bodies piling up and the mob eating itself alive. This is the true story of the Lufthansa heist, a tale of greed that spiraled into chaos. Stick around. You won't believe how it all unraveled. Let's rewind to how this all started. It was the late 1970s in New York City, a time when the mob ruled the streets and airports were ripe for the picking. The spark came from a guy named Louis Werner, cargo supervisor at Lufthansa's terminal at JFK. Werner wasn't a hardened criminal. He was just a regular guy with a bad gambling habit. He'd racked up about $20,000 in debts and owed it to a bookmaker with ties to the underworld. Desperate, Werner knew something valuable. Lufthansa often stored massive shipments of untraceable cash and jewels in their vault over the weekends. We're talking millions in bearer bonds, currency, and gems. Werner tipped off his bookmaker, Martin Krugman, figuring it could clear his debt. Krugman, seeing dollar signs, passed the info to Henry Hill, a mob associate. In turn, brought it to the man who would become the architect of the whole operation, James "Jimmy" the Gent Burke. Burke was a fascinating character, charming on the surface, ruthless underneath. He was an associate of the Lucchese crime family and a powerhouse in the hijacking game. He'd orchestrated heists before, but this was next level. Burke ran a bar in Queens called Robert's Lounge, a hangout for wise guys where deals were made. That's where the planning kicked off. Burke assembled a crew, each with a specific role. There was Tommy DeSimone, a hot-headed enforcer. He was the muscle. Angelo Seep, another tough guy, handled logistics. Parnell Stacks Edwards, a part-time crook, was the getaway driver. Joseph Manry and Robert McMahon were in for the heavy lifting. And Paolo Licastre, a Sicilian connected to the mob, rounded out the team. But before greenlighting the job, Burke needed approval. He went to Paul Vario, a capo in the Lucchese family, who gave the nod provided the family got its tribute, of course. The plan was meticulous. Werner provided blueprints, alarm details, and employee schedules. The crew rehearsed, timing every step. They knew the night shift had only a handful of workers and no armed guards inside. The target, a shipment arriving on December 8, 1978, worth an estimated $5 million in cash and almost $900,000 in jewelry and marked untraceable bills and gems. The heist was set for the early hours of Monday, December 11th. Now, picture the execution. It was like a scene from a thriller, but this was real. At 3:12 a.m., a black Ford van pulled up to the cargo gate. The men, all in black ski masks, cut the chain link and drove right in. Inside, they caught the 9-person night crew completely off guard. Guns drawn, they herded everyone into the lunchroom, bound their hands, and covered their eyes. No rough stuff unless necessary. Burke had drilled them to keep it clean. One robber forced the vault manager to disable the silent alarm and open the vault. They loaded 40 parcels, boxes of cash and jewels into the van. The whole thing took just 64 minutes. No shots, no injuries, no alarms tripped. They sped off to a nearby switch point where the loot was transferred to 2 other vehicles. Stacks Edwards was supposed to crush the van at a junkyard to destroy evidence. But here's where the cracks started showing. He got high, partied, and illegally parked the van in a no-parking zone in Brooklyn instead. Cops found it 2 days later, fingerprints intact. By then, the crew was celebrating, splitting a small initial payout while Burke held onto the bulk. The heist made headlines. Biggest cash robbery in U.S. history. The FBI jumped on it, but with no witnesses talking, they hit walls. Werner got his cut, about $80,000, but greed and paranoia were already setting in. This is where the story turns dark. Jimmy Burke was polite, but he was also paranoid as hell. He knew the score. Loose lips sink ships. And with millions at stake, anyone could flip to the cops. Plus, fewer shares meant more for him. So, the killings began almost immediately. First up, Parnell Stacks Edwards. On December 18th, just a week after the heist, DeSimone and Seep showed up at his apartment. Edwards had botched the van disposal. They shot him 6 times while he slept. Next, Martin Krugman, the bookmaker who started it all. He started demanding $500,000, way more than agreed. On January 6, 1979, he vanished. Hill later said Burke and Seep lured him to a meeting, strangled him, and dismembered the body. No trace was ever found. Then Richard Eaton, a con man loosely tied to the crew. When money went missing, Burke suspected him. On January 17th, Eaton was found frozen in a trailer, strangled with a piano wire, Burke's signature. Louis Cafara and his wife were next. Fat Louis was supposed to launder cash, but he got flashy, buying pink Cadillacs and tipping big. In March 1979, they disappeared. Rumor is their bodies were crushed in one of Louis's own car compactors. Teresa Ferrara, a mistress of Da Simone's, knew too much. Her dismembered remains washed up on a beach months later. In May, the bodies of crew members Frenchie McMahon and Joe Manry turned up in a parked car, each shot in the head. Burke feared they might talk as FBI pressure mounted. By mid-1979, at least half a dozen heist associates were dead. The FBI linked the murders but couldn't pin them directly on Burke. Henry Hill, seeing the writing on the wall, got arrested on unrelated charges in 1980 and flipped, entering witness protection. His testimony helped convict Burke on other crimes, but not the heist itself. The only person ever convicted for the robbery was Louis Werner, the inside man. He got 15 years. The money never recovered. The Lufthansa heist became legend, immortalized in books, in the movie Goodfellas. But what does this tell us about human behavior? In the mob world, power isn't just about pulling off a score. It's about controlling the narrative afterward. Jimmy Burke's paranoia was a survival instinct, but it backfired. By killing his crew, he eliminated threats, but also sowed the fear that drove Henry Hill to testify. Greed amplified it all. Each death meant a bigger slice, but it eroded trust, turning allies into enemies. Burke's iron grip led to his downfall. He died in prison in 1996, a stark reminder that in a world supposedly built on loyalty, paranoia poisons everything. Thanks for watching this real-life saga. Proving truth is often wilder than fiction.